like for instance Canada, we are very strong in Poland and various other countries as well. So that's what I wanted to say. I think if you can move on to the next slide, please.
Sure. So just as we're starting, we thought we've shared a little bit about who we are and what we're doing, but we would love to know more about who is in the audience. So if you can scan this QR code, we've got a couple questions there. It'd be interesting to know, or we can do show of hands. Who in this space is working in AI right now? Interesting to know, are you a developer? Are you working in innovation? Are you researching? Are you in policy? Is it working?
Oh, zoom the picture.
Yeah.
Is it possible? No?
One moment, otherwise we'll just do show of hands.
I think if you guys come out of the presentation mode, maybe you can zoom it that way, yeah? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, if you could just zoom that bit.
Is it working? No, it didn't really get bigger. If you make the window bigger. Okay, it's fine. We can do a show. We can do by show of hands. We do need the question, so.
If you go back to that same slide, please.
Okay, let's just do a show of hands. So, who here is working? Who here is a student? Student. Who here is working as a developer or in engineering? Very cool. Who here is working with the government in policy? Nice. And do we have anyone working in research? No? Anyone, what did I miss? Innovator, innovation, nice. Any others that we've missed? No? All good. And who here has created an AI agent, AI tool? A couple of you. And were they successful? POC, yes. Just POC, but not scaled.
Not reached that stage to scale, because not connected to the customer. So
fair.
Build a POC, now we'll connect to the customer.
Okay, right. Sounds good. Okay, well this session will be all around that. So if we can have the next slide. So what we want to talk to you today is that there are so many different AI projects and AI pilots happening in the world. And a pilot is the same as a proof of concept. It's an idea that you're testing to see if that idea is something that you can put into implementation later on. And I was looking up a stat of how many AI pilots are in the world, and that was very difficult to quantify. But what I did find was that only 30% of all the AI projects actually go into production. So what we're finding in the world is that we have lots of different AI ideas, but really a difficulty in translating that into something real. And the point of this session, and what I think is the point of the whole AI Summit, was that one of those reasons is because we don't have trust. So if we can have the next slide. So if we think about trust, that could be an organization's trust that the AI will work. It can be trust, in us as individuals around how our data will be shared, the outputs that it will give us. It could be trust in terms of the impacts that it will have on people and jobs and how that will work. And with that, what we're seeing is a lot of these AI projects are failing to consider that. And I don't know if you're familiar with the OECD AI Observatory, but they do a monitor where they essentially monitor all of the harms and all of the AI incidents around the world. And you can see that it's been growing exponentially. In 2025 of December only, there were 600 different incidents in the world. So those are 600 different times that people were harmed or that there was some kind of AI hazard that was created through a pilot. If we can have the next slide. It's just to zoom in, so this is a little bit difficult for you to read now, but in that harms monitor, you can click on any of them and learn more about them. So some that I found, the first one is in Romania. AI was being used to clone people's voices and then scam their relatives by making them think that they were in distress. As well, there was an example, I believe it was in Cairo, so there was a book fair, and a lot of the books there were actually produced using an equivalent of ChatGPT, so using generative AI, but there was no humans included in that project, so the books were printed with the prompts and the AI instructions still in them. So that created a lot of issue of creativity, and are these books generated by AI? Are they what we're looking for? Is that what we thought we were buying? And then there's several other examples happening all around the world where this is happening with facial recognition, for example. So using that at borders, and all of a sudden that might not work equal between different types of people. And all of these really build towards people losing trust in AI and being fearful of using it. So these are some examples, and we'll kind of go into next what we can do about that. So next we're going to look at why do these proof of concepts fail, and how do we shift from just experimenting to actually having impact. So if I can have next slide. So I put here 6 ideas of why I think, or what we're seeing with the customers we work on, is why proof of concepts are not working. The first one is between adoption and impact. So a lot of times we'll have organizations that are working on AI, and they've just thought about producing something, but they haven't actually thought about how will people use it. Will it have the goal that you're hoping it to have? Or say, for example, I'm using a legal tool. Will it actually serve the purpose that I'm looking for? Will it require more work for me to actually review everything it's doing? So there's a gap there. The second is around governance failures. So I'm not sure how many of you have thought about risk management. How do you identify all of the risks that are coming up? Who's going to be accountable to solving them? That might be things like, is it treating people differently? Is it biased? It might be things around security, for example. And then there's also a failure around misalignment. So between what you're looking for in society, those might not be aligned. So if you're, for example, prioritizing AI use to automate people, all of a sudden people are thinking, what about job loss? So there's not really a link in value there, and that's another reason. We've got 3 other challenges. The first one is sovereignty, which I think if anyone was around the summit today or this week, everybody was talking about sovereignty. So questions around how do we maintain control? Who is responsible? If, for example, a foreign government decides to turn off that AI access, is that something we trust, or how do we deal with that? We also have sustainability pressure, so thinking about the carbon cost of using AI and lack of clarity around that. And then change management is really all the people. So if we're thinking about these frontier firms or people are working with agents, what does that work culture look like? Have we actually thought about how people use AI and have time to test it and practice with it? Have we thought about the relationship between people and AI and how that works as well? So these are 6 quick concepts, and if we can have the next slide, is just a point to make is that, when we're considering a proof of concept, we're really just considering, does it function? We weren't considering any of those other 6 things, and if we want to scale AI, we need to think about everything else. So next slide. So I guess the point of this session is really to think about how do we actually do that. So what we have thought of is calling it AI in 4D, so 4-dimensional. The idea that you need to look at 4 different lenses to build trust in AI. If we could have next slide. And when we're looking at that, we're thinking if you can look at all of these 4 different lenses, that's really going to help you predict any harms or challenges that could come with the AI model and actually prevent them so that you can deploy and scale that AI. There's 4 dimensions that we're looking at. The first one is sovereignty, so thinking about who controls it, not just data, but looking at all the security measures behind it, where does the model come from, who has access to it. We're looking at green, so that's sustainability. Can this scale without destroying our climate goals, for example. We're looking at responsibility, so that is thinking about ethics and governance and bias and fairness and human-centered. And then valuable, so is this project actually really going to deliver a real-world benefit to people? So next slide. This one, I think it might be difficult for us to create a poll, so what we'll do is we'll do it by hand instead. So if we can just go to next slide. What I thought we could do before we give you more information of those 4D and how to apply them and break out into groups is we could just have some quick scenarios and test what your knowledge is of those themes already. So I'm going to give you an example, and then we'll do a show of hands of who thinks what lens is missed here. So this example is with the public health company. They're using AI to read different x-rays and radiology scans. And the point of the proof of concept is to help triage different illnesses or different breaks, things that you might find in a scan, and reduce that backlog. So when they actually started modeling and rolling it out, the team realized that this required more compute than they needed. It would exceed actually the available power supply, so there was not going to be ability to use it consistently. And that actually there was a large demand on water because the GPUs needed to be cooled, and this is in a water-sensitive area. So that would be another challenge between people and the planet. So this program failed, this hypothetical program failed because it was financially and politically impossible to run. So who thinks that this is a problem because of sovereignty? Who thinks that this is a problem with sustainability? Yeah. Who thinks that this is a problem with responsible AI and value? Yeah, agree. So I mark this one as sustainability. I think it's an example of the dynamics that we might have in the real world, is we want to scale AI, do really great things, but actually we haven't considered the power or the water usage that has, because we either don't have the information or it hasn't been something that's been baked in the front to think about. And we will give you some higher level into what this means and how to apply it in a moment. Okay, we have the next one. So we've got a second one. This is dealing with transport. So I think, we've all dealt with traffic this week. We're looking at this in this scenario here, is thinking about this project is to optimize traffic lights across the city and smooth congestion. But when they started implementing this project, it was only looking for average commute time. It was diverting traffic into lower income areas, and pedestrian safety actually became worse. So while this met the technical triggers that it did reduce and optimize time, there was a lot of community backlash. So does someone want to tell me which one they think this is a failure of?
Sovereign failure. Sovereign and responsible. Both of them.
Yeah, we've got some sovereignty, we've got responsibility. I think this one is actually value. So here, what the ministry had thought was valuable, reduce overall time, is not what's valuable to the people. What's valuable to the people is that they want to have safety and walking, and what's valuable to them is that you protect communities and you don't have unbiased impact. Next one. So now we're looking at justice. So here we've got a justice system. Our justice department is building AI to triage different complaints from citizens and reroute them to the right legal body. So whether it's the courts or a commissioner or something like that. In the pilot, it performed really well. But later, when they started to prepare to deploy this into production, the team discovers that 1, the model is hosted offshore. 2, they don't have a lot of information on when the model will be updated, and they don't have control over that. This government doesn't. That different logic within the model could change based on updates that they couldn't control, and that they can't audit the logs. So who do we think, what do we think this time? Yes. Okay, everyone is sovereignty. Sorry, did you say something else? A responsible AI? I think that could also be here because they hadn't thought of maybe all of these risks beforehand. But I agree here, especially when you've got a national organization, they need to have control of the model and how it functions. Not being able to update it or audit it in such a sensitive area like justice is a real challenge. So sovereignty is a challenge here. And then last one. Okay, so here we've got a social science agency, and they're using AI to determine who's eligible for social benefits. And the pilot showed that they were able to progress and reduce the time and have fewer manual checks. But when they were actually doing this in real life, one, the model wasn't able to explain why it had made a decision, so why it had allocated benefits to someone versus someone else. There was no ability to understand how to appeal it. So if you were rejected, for example, you couldn't understand why that was and how to change that decision. There was bias discovered between different groups, so age groups or ethnicity or gender. It wasn't applying it the same to equal to everyone. And there was no agreed process for how you would escalate if there was a problem. So this became very seriously harmful, and there was a lot of vulnerable citizens who could be impacted. So in this scenario, what do we think between responsible and sorry? And value? Anybody else? Training data not accurate. Agreed. So I agree. I think this one is a good one of responsible, but also valuable here. A responsible AI is thinking about bias. It's thinking about fairness. It's thinking about the data that you have. It's thinking about all of these harms up front and how you're going to deal with them. And then equally with value, people need to see value of why they're using AI in a public system. And if it's actually harming people, then it's not necessarily a good use case. So far everyone is doing good. I think we can move on. But what we wanted to go through now is how does this work in real life? What does this actually look like? And so I'll pass to Omid.
Can we have the next slide, please? Right. So I think it's clear, having had this conversation and the contribution from yourselves that it's not so straightforward because there are different dimensions, and this is the point that Teresa is making in terms of having to look at different angles. So over the last 2 days, or it's definitely the day before yesterday, I was going around in the summit hall, and I was asking everyone, because you see everywhere it says sovereign AI, sovereign AI. I was asking them, what do you mean by sovereign AI? And some people were talking about, we need to have our data centers here. Somebody was saying, our models need to be here. There were different kind of conversations in terms of what sovereign AI actually means in the context of AI and how it works and how it deploys and so on and so forth. But the key thing is that ultimately it comes down to control. And my view is that it's not even just about the organization, the sector potentially, or the nation, but also about the people. So where is your data? Who's actually looking at your data? Why are they looking at your data? What will they do with your data? If you don't have an understanding of that, the likelihood of you trusting that system is very low, and therefore it would be susceptible to failure. So it's really, really key to understand the implications of data sovereignty, AI sovereignty, and so on. I mean, I was talking to one country called Serbia, and they were saying that, we have a view that, we need to have control of our own environment. So we're building new large language models in our own geography, and we are going to have control over what we do. And I think that's the key thing. But the important thing is that if the trust is lost in terms of the sovereignty, the likelihood is that the system will fail. And I can assure you that if it's not designed in at the beginning, you're going to test this under a lot of pressure. You're likely to be in a crisis as well, because when you don't know if your health data is trained on somebody else's data, or you're using very commercially available large language models, then the thing is you're actually beholden to those people, and therefore you may not be able to achieve what you want to achieve as the objective. So it's really, really important dimension in terms of a successful deployment. And all of the stuff that I'm going to go through here, whilst I've seen them through failure, but also they're the recipe for success. So you can think of it in both ways. So if I could have the next slide, please. Yeah. So green AI, I mean, this is kind of not dissimilar to what we had before in terms of cloud and green computing, and the fact that, you know, unless you actually look at the environment, look at it from an economic viability of the system, ultimately what it means that it's going to cost a lot more and it won't scale. And if it doesn't scale, and you cannot handle the data volumes and the amount of usage that you're going to have, the likelihood is that it would stop. Now, in my mind, this is the approach to take here is to make sure you address both. And what happens is that addressing both the environmental effects as well as the cost actually work very, very nicely together. So we had a similar scenario before in how we deployed cloud services, and the same thing is translating to this now. So the more economic your system is, the more likely that, you know, it's going to reduce your less greenhouse gases as well. And as a result of that, you can sustain this system longer term. I mean, we all know, you know, people are building now massive data centers. Yesterday, there was, I think, a discussion around Microsoft building the new data center that consumes as much electricity as all of Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is an enormous city. So the environmental effects of what we're doing are really key, and it has a direct link into the costs that are driven out of that as well. And I can again assure you, I think if there's any takeaway, that if an AI system can't scale sustainably, then it won't scale at all. I'm pretty convinced of that. So we can move on. So the next one is responsible AI, and you know, I think a lot of people here are familiar with that, you know, in terms of governance, assurance. Are we doing the right things ethically? You know, is there bias in the system? All of those things fall under the responsible AI banner. And it's really fundamental in terms of giving people that trust that Teresa was talking about in order to use the system in anger and kind of really link, you know, their kind of lifestyle to that, and so on and so forth. And as you know now, there are all sorts of other systems now, like the AI companions that kind of help you achieve different things, whether it's weight loss or you know, even provide you counseling and help you along in your life. But unless they're done in, you know, a ethical way and an unbiased way, they're not leading you down, you know, a particular path, they are likely to fail as well. Now, one thing that I wanted to bring to your attention, and yesterday, yesterday or the day before, Prime Minister Modi was talking about this, which is really key as far as I'm concerned in the responsible AI area, is the human-centered design of AI. Because when you're actually building an AI system, you need to have in your mind, you know, who you're trying to help and how, and what does this actually mean to them when they start to use the system, right? So, and I think the example around, you know, the traffic management was a very good one, because we all struggled over the last few days with the traffic, and if a system is put into place which does not take into account what the purpose of what they're doing is, then it is likely to fail. I think the goal of the system itself as well is really key in terms of whether it gets the right sort of results or not. So there are many systems where people don't consider that, and as a result of that, it becomes unusable by the people, or it might have harms built into it as a result of that. So, but the last one, the last dimension, is how valuable that AI is, and what does it mean in terms of the outcomes and what the measures are, and so on. So a couple of days ago, I attended a session where we had a senior executive from UAE. They were talking about, as a country, what they're trying to do. And it's really key for us to understand, what we're trying to achieve. So they had a very simple kind of thinking in terms of, what they were trying to do, which made what they were doing much more measurable. So what was the intention for them? The intention was that there are about 12 million people in United Arab Emirates, and they wanted to effectively be, rather than 12 million people, with the introduction of AI, do as much work as 120 million, almost like 10 times the size. And I think that actually is really, really key. Very simple reason as to why you're doing what you're doing and how you measure it and what the value is. Now, if you actually think about that in the context of, say, India, in my opinion, that ambition doesn't give India the value. So to create, I don't know, lots of agents to replace people's jobs or do more jobs, right, doesn't actually have the right outcome, because there's already a lot of people here. Why would you do that, right? So you have to think really carefully about what the value is of the system itself, because without thinking about that, you end up building a system that you cannot measure the value of, and then ultimately what it would do is that it would just become a dead weight. Why do we have this at all? Should we be getting rid of it or not? So hopefully you kind of understand all of the aspects of the different areas. At Kainos, we deploy systems, AI systems, into production, so we see a lot of these issues. And we are quite lucky because our customers, which are all the government departments, are actually very, very clued up as well in terms of what different aspects of what we're doing are, and they see value in it. So it's not just about deploying the technology, but how is this technology going to affect the UK citizens, and where we work in other countries like Canada, US, and so on, those countries respectively. So I think that was my last slide. I think I'm going to hand over to you.
So we had originally intended to maybe do different breakout groups. The audience is quite small, so it's up to you. We could either have everyone kind of have a few discussions and talk about what you think is the most challenging, or we could use 10 minutes if we want to do a Q&A, if people want to share their thoughts. Put your hands up if you want to go into a breakout group and discuss one of the concepts together.
I don't know.
Okay, so we'll do the second.
Yeah.
Nobody voted for that. So why don't we can have a discussion. It'd be interesting to hear, are you looking at these 4 challenges? Which do you think is the most difficult? Which do you feel like you've solved? And we can have a little discussion around that for a little bit.
Hi,
And introduce yourself.
Hi there, thank you. My name is Ami Kotecha. I'm co-founder of Amro Partners. We are a real estate company, and we are now getting involved in a data spin-out. My challenge is as follows. I'm one of the co-founders of the company, as a leader, I'm very keen, of course, that there's AI adoption, there's upskilling, etc., in the company, and productivity challenges where we have them should be addressed using this technology. I feel like I am often left in the lurch to actually literally make all the decisions within the private sector environment, whereas I think government needs to step in and make some of these decisions on our behalf. In terms of model utilization, where we go, what we do with it. I mean, we are good experimenters, so fortunately we're throwing capital at experimenting. Not every company can A, afford to do that, or B, would want to do that because of the same sort of issues you mentioned right at the start, which are aligned with just the fear of adopting something that's going to break your system or open yourself up to some kind of cyber attack, etc. So how do you see this sort of playing out in the next 6 months, 8 year, 12 months, because obviously the technology is moving really fast, as to what role the government is going to play in saying this is safe to use and this is still experimental and you should worry about it?
Fair. I think we're probably seeing different approaches with different government. So I think in the EU, for example, we have the EU AI Act, and that lists 4 different levels of risk. So we've got, if it's a low risk system where you're using AI in the back office, there's not really any requirement. It's like, go ahead and do it. That then there's a medium risk. A high risk would be something that would be like really critical infrastructure or something that's impacting people directly. And if it's a high risk, then there's a load of different things that you need to do around transparency with people. There's also prohibited use cases of how to use AI. So I think that's one example where some governments are actually saying, this is what we've deemed safe. And if it's not one of these uses, then we want to see a lot of other checks. In the UK, we have regulation that's looking at third-party suppliers right now. And if they're critical to the infrastructure or not of the country, then there will be new requirements on AI as well, in terms of like the updates that go in, transparency around models, explainability. But then maybe you have the US approach where you don't have regulation yet. So I think it really depends on the country. I think a lot of what we heard yesterday was around, for India, thinking about ethical and responsible AI, but I don't know if you have any regulation in place around that yet. But I think, I think it's very difficult otherwise for a private company, because otherwise you're fighting to who gets to the bottom, who's the cheapest, who's the quickest. And this week I was touring around with different businesses, and everyone was thinking, how do we do agents? But no one was thinking about human-centered, ethical, responsible. So I think it does need to come from the government to have a base. But I have noticed that some are maybe more forthcoming with that than others.
Yeah.
I think just before, I just wanted to answer your question about the government. There is a data protection and data personalization law that was legislated last November 2025. It's going to be legal in the next 27 October onwards. They are getting a time of around 18 to 24 months. After that, what you are saying, the addressing of how the data is handled by the person who is creating the data, who is like the person who's created, who is the principal, or one who is the repository, all that rules are coming. But presently, I would say it is 0.1% of that responsible AI part which is happening. But over a period of these 2 years, the preparation is going to happen where it will slowly get into that mode, actually.
Sure. I was just going to say, so she's a high flyer entrepreneur in the UK, actually. She's there. But I was just going to say, in my mind, right, there are a couple of things that we should really push the government to do, right? One is about smart data. So they've been playing around with this for years and years. So we've got quite a lot of open banking applications now. But this can be extended way beyond open banking, where different organizations can share data. Like, for instance, in the property market, how do you go through the cycle of all the way from putting an offer in to conveyancing to, valuation to the end, right? So that's really critical. The other side of it is actually having trust in language models which are built within the UK itself, right? And I think most of even Serbia is doing that, right? French have already done it with Mistral. So there is a lot of examples of this, and that's where the government can really help. And that's what we should be lobbying them to do, in my opinion.
Any other comment? Oh yeah, maybe behind you, or you have? Oh, sorry, you had your hand up first.
Yeah,
so you go first, and then behind you next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am building a agentic AI for vending machines, and I have been an entrepreneur in the corporate world. But before 3 years, I was just doing physical stuff, right? Doing products, innovation, the food and beverage, sector. One of the challenge which I am seeing is how to build value at a platform level rather than an individual customer level, right? For example, if I offer this vending machine agentic AI for a PepsiCo, they would say, don't do it for Coca-Cola, right? Give it to us only and keep it with us. So, but UPI, for example, was not a MasterCard or a Visa card thing, right? It was for the whole country, right? So, how do you get that kind of a traction to build a platform instead of one very customized for a customer who might say that don't give it to anybody else, right? So that is the key question that I am trying to address, and I do not seem to find answers.
I agree. I think that is a challenge in the corporate world. I used to work at Microsoft, and even there it was, if you're using our technology, or if we're coming on a panel, then we're on a panel, but we're not having Amazon on the panel or Google on the panel with us. But I think, like you say, that's really figuring out what you have that's so unique. And that actually goes to the value lens, I think, is that if you have something that's really valuable to people, you make the case that it has to be shared. But it is difficult if you're building it with one customer first, because that almost becomes their IP that they want to keep, right? So something that we are doing when we're working on responsible AI projects is we're looking at all the similarity of requests that come in, and we're sort of doing the work on ourselves in the background, and then we're taking elements that we need and exposing them to the different customers, and that way we keep that IP. But it is very difficult to get multiple customers on board if they're all competing.
Yeah, so for example, I build a few IP in the area of sustainability, like clean air, clean water. I sold to a company, but that company is not commercializing it. I don't want to name that company because it didn't want to commercialize, it wanted to keep that technology, right? So that's a big challenge that I am seeing in the corporate world, that a company will buy another company, but it won't implement for the society or for the good, right? So that is the challenge that I am seeing. How do you handle that? Because that is part of the responsible AI as well as the valuable AI part.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think you have your own kind of description of this problem. But I was in the US a few months ago, and I saw, I don't know whether you're familiar with SVB, but it's basically a Silicon Valley Bank, right? And they did a presentation to us where they were talking about where all the funds are going, right? And if you actually see what is going on in terms of this, I think it's about $1 trillion worth of investment. This investment is flowing only into a handful of companies. What those companies are doing, they literally are stifling everybody else, right? This is a commercial reality, right? But if I was to offer you some options, I would say there shouldn't be just the IP. You should be thinking about it more as a service that you could build layers on, right? So you may retain the IP, or you may share the IP. It could be a co-created, whatever it is, but it's got to have a service model attached to it. Because if PepsiCo buys X and then Coca-Cola buys Y, why would they be buying it? And how would you be able to build on top of that? But you know, it's very, very commercially challenging problem. It's been there for many years. This is nothing new, as Teresa said, exactly like that.
UPI beat that, right? So today UPI compared to a MasterCard or a Visa, in India everyone is using that, right? And there are applications which are attached to UPI, whether it's a Paytm or a Google or whatever, Amazon Pay, all of them are on the platform of API, right? So the question I had was, why are IT companies, for example, Kainos, right, or an Infosys or an Accenture, not looking at the platform approach and looking at the services approach where they can put their team, manpower, and run projects, right? So I see this as a challenge. I have been talking to the top management of Infosys, Accenture. Every time I go with the proposal, they say, just do it for a client, you know, and we will attach you as an expert. I don't want to do that. I want to build a platform. There's nobody who is really interested in building that sort of a business, which is path-breaking. It takes longer time, right? Like UPI came, it happened organically. Can these kind of initiatives happen inorganically? That was the question.
Yeah, I think they are looking at both. But yeah, sorry, I think we should take one more question because we have very few minutes left. So we can talk after, and I want to get to the person behind you for his question as well, and then we'll do a quick wrap-up.
Good afternoon. Thanks for covering those areas in the lectures that were much needed to understand. So you talked about sovereignty AI and then you talked about value or responsible AI. So there might be few scenarios where while chasing sovereignty, we might have to bypass value additions or responsibility for the citizens, while the other way around also. So can you discuss about those scenarios where you value sovereignty more than talking about responsible AI or value additions AI and the otherwise also, and when they can be parallelly taken into account? Thank you.
So you're asking around responsible AI and valuable AI, where they link, or where you might,
AI.
where one might be more useful than the other,
Exactly.
right? So way I see responsible AI, I think it can actually incorporate as like a lens for everything, but it's much easier to think of it as a separate. I think responsible AI can encompass 5 things. So like ethics, trust, like bias and fairness, human-centered, governance and security. Where I think that distinguishes from value is looking beyond financial growth. So a lot of organizations you might work with, or when you think of many organizations in the world, they're looking at how much money will this save me, or how much time, or how much productivity. But I think valuable AI is looking at what goes beyond that. Does it actually create more well-being in people? Does it give people time back with their families, for example, or other hobbies they want to do? Valuable is thinking about what's the long-term benefit that this will have in terms of how we change society. Maybe it's going to create a whole bunch of different jobs now in something else. So I think actually if you're using responsible AI, it will create value. So I still think they go hand in hand, but that's probably how I distinguish it. Is that your question? No. I'm not sure. Maybe Omid has an answer, you know, also.
Yeah, so I think you're saying what happens when you have to do a trade-off, right, between sovereignty and value. And I think this is a very good question, to be honest, right? Because when you, so again, yesterday I was wandering around in the summit. I keep asking people questions about different things. And one of the countries that I spoke to, they know that using GPT models or Claude and various other things is a quick route to building what they need to build, because they're there. It is there, it is immediate, and it can be done, you know, almost like without any issues at all. But they're taking the hard route, right? So they're saying, actually, we don't want to do that, because what if tomorrow we fall out with them, as Europeans are falling out with Americans anyway, right? So what happens if they turn off the systems, right? What would we do then, right? So if you think about it in terms of the speed and the value is actually going with what you got, right? But the more challenging thing, which is the value is, can we actually use this system for our citizens on an ongoing basis? Is that data something that belongs to us? Are the models aligned with what we are doing? So they want to be able to enable their people in order to deliver the right outcomes. And that would not happen if they just outsource their sovereignty to the US. So I think those are some of very, very important factors that need to be explained. But ultimately, from a value perspective, Teresa's spot on. I think it's about what is the value in terms of to the people that are going to use that system. So if tomorrow we found this fantastic system, like I give you an example, we were stopped multiple times in terms of the traffic because some VIP was coming out of somewhere, right? And then just literally closed the road. So we're sitting there for like half an hour and then we get going again. That's happened, I think, 3 or 4 times so far. So if you were to build the system, you would be needing to think, you know, what is the value for those taxi drivers, all these public that are going around? And that's the key thing that you need to be able to use AI to achieve, right? This needs to be measurable. It needs to actually help the people itself. So yes, it's a very tricky trade-off. Very tricky.
Yeah, I think the trade-offs is really good, especially in sustainability as well. So a lot of times organizations might just think, how do we adopt AI as quick as possible, get people to use it as much as possible, but actually every query that you use has a sustainability impact. And so I think there's a trade-off there, because there might be a sustainability impact, but depending on where you are, you might value training people to use AI more, so you might be okay with that impact because it's more about getting people comfortable with using it. But then if you are an organization that really values sustainability, you have really strong carbon goals or net zero goals, then actually that might be the trade-off that you have. So I think one thing that we're doing when we're working with organizations is we're getting them to make that very difficult decision of here's high concern, here's low concern. We map out all the harms that we can think of and all the principles and values that align to them, and they can't put any side by side. And they have to move all of them from high to low concern. And very quickly that makes you see what's real for your organization. And I've seen a lot of them put sustainability at the bottom, which to me is a little bit concerning, but it does start to think about really understanding your organization and how those trade-offs are going to play. And that's what we're finding in the human one as well.
So just 10 seconds more, adding to yours, ranking low to high. So out of all these four, sustainability, sovereignty, responsibility and value addition, how do you rate them as low to high? All the four factors that you have covered in your PPT. How do you rate all these four on a scale of...
How do I rate them?
Yeah, you both, please.
I think that's very difficult. I think I'm putting responsible AI at the top, because I think it can actually, it's a cheat because it can kind of include sustainability actually, and I think it will create value. I think, so then I would probably put sovereignty lower than that, but obviously this year has maybe changed that geopolitically. I think I still put responsible AI at the top. I'll make that hard choice. What will you say?
I think I kind of agree, and I think Prime Minister Modi said this himself yesterday about, so human-centered AI design is part of responsible AI, right? A few days ago, me and Teresa were talking to someone, and they were describing a system, right? Now, if you just indulge me for a couple of minutes, let me explain the background of the system, and then you see how it's relevant. So they were building a system for kind of the nursing or old people's home, right? So you may know that elderly get dehydrated and they forget to drink water, and then that causes a lot of problem for them. So they built a system where, you know, using AI and vision, they were seeing if the elderly were having enough liquid in the day or not, right? Now, that's fantastic. Everybody says this is a brilliant idea, right? But then you think about it, they are monitoring those elderly both in the area where it is common, as well as where they may be in their bedrooms or whatever, right? So that brings a challenge, right? And then the other challenge was, you know, what about the people, the nurses who are actually hydrating them? Because that could become a negative effect on them, because somebody might be saying, you're not doing your job right, right? And what about the family of the elderly? What about the impact on them? So I think it is really important to understand why we build the system, who it affects, how it affects them, and what the long-term benefits are, which brings the value, right? This is why it's 4 dimensions. None of these are independent. I think they're all relating to one another, one shape or form.
Yeah. So we'll work towards wrapping up, because I think we're getting the time check. Can we, but this one switched because it said 8 and then it said 17 and now it says 10. And then she told me I had 7. Oh, this one's right.
This
okay.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see if there are more questions.
Yeah, but we have the takeaways and things to go through also.
Yeah.
So I think we'll wrap up and we can talk to people individually afterwards. Can we skip through some of the slides? Because we wanted to ask, next one. Next one, I think. Okay, so we actually wanted to flip that question and ask this to you in the audience as well. Which one would be your top? So of those 4 lenses, sovereign, green, responsible AI, which one do you think is an absolute must-have? And you can only pick one. And if this isn't there, it's going to derail the project. Shall I show of hands? Who wants to say, who says sovereignty is the most important? Who says that it's green AI sustainability? Who says it's responsible? And then value? Some people didn't vote. You didn't vote back there. But I think it sounds like a lot of people are in the responsible and value is the most important. I agree, but I think what we wanted to come across is all of these need to come into play as well. Can we do the next slide? Of that question though, who has a responsible AI practice in place? Who uses a framework or anything like that? Anybody? Who has a sovereign AI policy in place? No? And who is looking at sustainability? None of us. So it's a takeaway for all of us. So I think we wanted to wrap up with how do I take this forward? So a couple points I want to make. The first is that we have taken a lot of the learnings and things we've talked about in this and we've turned it into a white paper. There's a link below, but we can share it with you. We've shared it on LinkedIn as well. To talk about these learnings, and we wrapped it up to say for each of those themes, here's 8 to 10 things that you could do if you really wanted to take sovereignty, green, sustainable, and responsible and valuable AI forward. So please check out that paper. Very happy to talk about it and give you insights. I think the key takeaways for us here is that no single dimension is the answer. I think that's come out in the scenarios, in the conversations that we've had, and in how we're prioritizing, is that you can't really have just one. You need all of them if you want to scale that project and really make it to production. The second point is on trade-offs. So it was really good that that came up in the conversation, is that just being aware of the trade-offs that you will have to make and having something in process to talk about why you made that decision is important. I think a takeaway for everyone here is think about an AI policy, which talks about how you'll use AI and what you will prioritize. Think about having a responsible AI framework, which is essentially all the questions and things that you want to be implemented across, ethics or across trust, security. And then really think about how you can turn some of this into numbers. So what are the KPIs that you can actually look at for sustainability, for users, for ethics? Don't just make them a concept of we will be ethical. Think about what that actually means for you and how you're going to measure it. That's important if you want to get funding, investment, and show the project as a success. And then finally, think about how you can upskill your teams to understand these concepts and how you can incorporate diverse views. I think that's probably the most important in building out the responsibility. So we will wrap up. This is to say, if you want to get in touch with us, here's our details. Find us on LinkedIn, send us an email. We can have a couple minutes after this, since I know there was 2 questions in the audience that we might not have got to. But otherwise, we hope the session was useful. If you want to give us feedback, here's a bigger QR code. So if you want to stay in touch, then fill out this. Let us know if there's anything we can improve on the session or any questions that you have. We're super happy to hear that. And otherwise, just a big thank you for your participation. And yes, hope you have a good rest of the day and a good weekend.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think great questions there about trade-off, and absolutely the right question to ask, because none of these are unique. Sorry, please, go ahead. Yeah.
Like you were talking about trade-offs. I just wanted to say, okay, every model have their own aspects, like pros and cons, or as you said, different dimension. I've got most of my answers from those questions, but I just wanted to ask, if we are building something and taking these aspects, like, okay, taking responsible AI, valuable AI on them, but if we are taking, we'll be missing some aspects. As he said about responsible AI, if we are taking, okay, like accuracy and fairness, if we'll take, okay, sorry.
If it makes it easier to speak in Hindi, I understand.
It's okay, but fairness. Okay, like if we are doing sorry again.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's no issue at all. I mean, you can ask us on email as well. It's not an issue. More than happy we'll respond to you, you know, if you want to ask us the question.
Exactly.
Hello, actually, we don't have much time anymore.
4 minutes.
So, no,
Is it wrong?
yeah, we don't have much time anymore. I think you'll discuss it after the session.
Yeah.
All right? Okay. So we thank you, Omid and also Teresa from Kindness. So we would like to present you something. We'd like to call Omid, please, and we'll hand over the memento to him.
Thank you.
So now we'd like to call Teresa. You can stand there.